Some stories are buried because they're embarrassing. Others are buried because they're dangerous. But this one was buried because the people who survived it begged the church never to let anyone know what happened inside Saint Mercy Monastery. The official report blamed it on a gas leak. The local police called it mass hysteria. The church sealed every document related to the case. But none of those explanations answered one simple question. Why were there deep claw marks carved into the monastery walls, nearly 20 feet above the ground? Or why did every clock inside the building stop at exactly 3:17 a.m.? No one could explain it. Not even the investigators. And the only man who survived never spoke another word. Saint Mercy Monastery sat alone on top of Black Hollow Hill, surrounded by thick pine forests where sunlight barely reached the ground. Locals avoided the place, not because it looked haunted, but because of what they heard at night. People claimed they could hear church bells ringing long after midnight. The weird part? The monastery hadn't used its bell tower in over 30 years. Still, every single night, the bells rang. 3 slow chimes. Then silence. Nobody ever dared to check. Because around Black Hollow, everyone grew up hearing the same warning. If the bells ring after midnight, stay inside. Most people laughed at it. Until the disappearances started. Father Thomas wasn't the kind of priest who believed every ghost story. He believed in facts, logic, faith. When the Vatican assigned him to Saint Mercy, he honestly thought people were just being dramatic. Old buildings make strange noises. Lonely places create scary rumors. Simple. Or so he thought. The monastery looked ancient. Stone walls covered in moss. Broken stained glass windows. A giant wooden cross standing crooked in the courtyard. Everything about the place felt wrong. Not scary. Just wrong. Like the building itself wanted everyone to leave. The moment Father Thomas stepped inside, every candle in the entrance hall went out. At the exact same time. No wind. No sound. Just darkness. One of the older sisters quickly relit them with shaking hands. She forced a smile. Don't worry, Father. It happens every now and then. But her voice didn't sound convincing. Not even close. The monastery housed 12 nuns. Or at least, that's what Father Thomas was told. During dinner he counted them. 1, 2, 3. All the way to 13. He frowned. Maybe he counted wrong. So he counted again. Still, 13. One nun sat quietly at the far end of the table. Unlike the others, she never touched her food. Never looked up. Never spoke. She simply stared at the table with her hands folded. Perfectly still. For nearly an hour. Father Thomas leaned toward Mother Agnes. Who's the sister at the end of the table? Mother Agnes froze. What sister? The one in the black veil. She slowly turned toward the empty chair. There was nobody there. Father Thomas blinked. He could have sworn someone had been sitting there just seconds ago. Mother Agnes gave him a nervous smile. You've had a long journey, Father. You should get some rest. The conversation ended there. But something didn't feel right. Because Father Thomas knew exactly what he'd seen. His room was on the 3rd floor. The oldest part of the monastery. The wooden floor creaked beneath every step. The walls smelled of damp stone and old paper. At exactly 3:17 a.m. he woke up. Not because of a nightmare. Because someone was whispering outside his door. A woman's voice. Soft, slow. Repeating the same sentence again. And again. And again. He couldn't understand the words. But somehow, he knew they weren't prayers. He opened the door. The hallway was empty. No footsteps. No shadows. Nothing. Then, ding. One church bell echoed through the building. Then another. Then another. 3 slow chimes. Just like the townspeople had described. Father Thomas looked down the hallway. And that's when he saw her. A nun. Standing completely still. At the far end of the corridor. Her face hidden beneath a black veil. She wasn't moving. Not even breathing. He took one cautious step forward. So, can I help you, sister? No answer. Another step. Still nothing. Then, without warning, her head tilted sideways. Slowly. Too slowly. Until it bent far beyond what any human neck should allow. Father Thomas froze. Every instinct screamed at him to run. Instead, he walked closer. Big mistake. Because the moment he reached the end of the hallway, she was gone. Completely gone. No doors had opened. No footsteps. Nothing. Just an empty corridor. And on the wooden floor, fresh, muddy footprints. Except, they weren't shaped like human feet. They looked more like Father Thomas stared at them for several seconds, then quietly whispered to himself, "What are you?" He didn't know it yet, but by asking that single question, he had just invited something ancient to notice him, and once it noticed you, it never stopped watching. Father Thomas barely slept after that night. By sunrise, he had convinced himself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe stress. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe his eyes had played tricks on him. But those hoof prints, they were still there. Exactly where he'd seen them. Dark mud stretched across the wooden floor before stopping in front of a solid stone wall. Not a door. Not a window. Just a wall. There was nowhere else they could have gone. Father Thomas slowly reached down and touched one of the prints. Still wet. No way. Behind him, a calm voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." He turned around. Mother Agnes stood at the end of the hallway, her face unusually pale. "The sisters don't use this floor anymore." Father Thomas pointed toward the footprints. "Then explain these." Mother Agnes looked at the floor, then looked back at him. "I don't see anything." For the first time, Father Thomas realized she wasn't lying. She genuinely couldn't see them. Breakfast was strangely quiet. The sisters kept their heads down. No one laughed. No one talked. Even the sound of silverware scraping against plates felt unnaturally loud. Then Father Thomas noticed something. There were only 11 nuns at the table. Yesterday there had been 12. Or maybe 13. Depending on who he had actually seen. He leaned toward Mother Agnes. "One of the sisters is missing." Mother Agnes frowned. "We're all here." Father Thomas counted again. 11. He looked around the room. "Where's Sister Evelyn?" Every single nun stopped eating. Silence. One of them slowly whispered, "Who?" "Sister Evelyn. I met her yesterday." The room went completely still. Then Mother Agnes smiled. A fake smile. "We've never had a Sister Evelyn." Goosebumps crawled up Father Thomas's arms. He remembered her face. He remembered speaking to her. He remembered watching her pray. How could nobody else remember? Later that afternoon, Father Thomas searched the monastery records. If Sister Evelyn existed, there had to be paperwork. He searched for hours. Nothing. Birth records. Transfer papers. Letters. Photographs. Nothing. Then he found an old group photo dated 1989. 12 smiling nuns stood outside the monastery. His heartbeat stopped. Standing in the back row was the same silent nun from last night. The black veil. The pale face. The empty eyes. He flipped the photo over. Only 11 names were written. The woman in the back had no name. Someone had literally scratched it away. "You've got to be kidding me." That evening a violent storm rolled over Black Hollow. Rain slammed against the stained glass windows. Thunder shook the entire monastery. The lights flickered. Then everything went dark. One by one, candles lit themselves. Not all at once. 1, 2, 3. As if invisible hands were walking through the chapel. The sisters immediately dropped to their knees. Some began crying. Others started praying so fast their words became impossible to understand. Father Thomas whispered, "What are they afraid of?" Mother Agnes grabbed his arm so hard it hurt. "Don't speak." "What?" "Whatever happens. Do not look toward the altar." Father Thomas stared at her. She wasn't asking. She was begging. For nearly a minute, no one moved. Only thunder echoed outside. Then, the soft laugh. It came from the altar. A woman's laugh. Gentle. Almost playful. Father Thomas couldn't help himself. He slowly looked up. Big mistake. Standing beside the altar was the nun. Except this time, she wasn't wearing shoes. 2 long black hooves rested on the stone floor. Her hands looked human. Until they slowly stretched. Fingers becoming impossibly long. Thin. Ending in claws. And beneath the veil, something smiled. Not a human smile. Too wide. Too many teeth. Father Thomas couldn't breathe. The creature slowly raised one finger and pointed directly at him. Then every candle exploded. Darkness swallowed the chapel. Screams filled the room. Someone shouted, "Run!" When the emergency lights finally turned on, the chapel was empty. Benches overturned. Candles scattered everywhere. Blood stained the marble floor. But there were only 10 nuns left. One had vanished. No scream. No struggle. No body. Just gone. The local police arrived before sunrise. They searched every room. Every hallway. Every inch of the surrounding forest. Nothing. It was as if the missing nun had simply stopped existing. The sheriff finally shrugged. Maybe she ran away. Father Thomas stared at the claw marks carved into the chapel walls. Each one was nearly 4 inches deep. No, he whispered. Something took her. That night, an elderly groundskeeper named Elias quietly knocked on Father Thomas's door. His hands were shaking. I've worked here 42 years. I've never spoken about this. He placed a rusted iron key into Father Thomas's hand. There is a basement beneath the monastery. The church sealed it decades ago. They told everyone it was because of flooding. Elias leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. That's a lie. Father Thomas looked at the old key. What's really down there? Elias's eyes filled with tears. She is. Before Father Thomas could ask another question, a deafening scream echoed through the monastery. Not one person. Several. Father Thomas and Elias sprinted toward the courtyard. The massive wooden cross standing in the center of the monastery had been flipped upside down. No one had seen it happen. No ropes. No machinery. No footprints. Only one message had been carved into the wood. Fresh. As if cut by claws. 3 words. Let me out. Father Thomas slowly tightened his grip around the rusted key. He suddenly understood one terrifying truth. Whatever was pretending to be a nun, it wasn't trying to get inside the monastery. It had been trapped beneath it, and somehow it was already free. The rusted key felt strangely warm in Father Thomas's hand. It didn't make sense. The deeper he walked into the monastery, the warmer it became. By midnight, the bells rang again. 3 slow chimes. Ding, ding, ding. This time, he wasn't the only one who heard them. Every sister stopped praying. Every candle flickered. And without saying a word, they all turned toward the basement door. Almost like something down there had just woken up. Father Thomas stood before the heavy iron door. It hadn't been opened in decades. Rust covered every hinge. Ancient warning symbols had been carved into the stone around it. Most had faded with time. One sentence was still readable. Do not open, no matter what voice calls your name. Seriously? He laughed nervously. You've got to be kidding me. He slid the old key into the lock. It didn't fit. For a second. Nothing happened. Then, the key twisted by itself. Click. The massive iron door slowly creaked open. A freezing wind rushed out. It smelled like wet earth, rotting wood, and something metallic. Blood. The staircase disappeared into complete darkness. Father Thomas lit a lantern. Every step echoed through the underground tunnel. Stone walls. Ancient crosses. Hundreds of strange symbols carved into the ceiling. Then, he noticed something horrifying. The walls weren't cracked. They were scratched. Thousands, maybe millions, of claw marks. Some fresh. Some so old they had turned black. Whatever had been trapped here had spent years trying to claw its way out. No way. At the bottom of the stairs, he found a circular chamber. Chains as thick as tree trunks hung from the ceiling. Most had been ripped apart. The floor was covered with dried blood. In the center stood an old stone altar. On top of it, a leather journal, untouched by dust, almost as if someone had left it there waiting for him. The first page read, "If you're reading this, she's already escaped." Father Thomas's heartbeat sped up. He turned the page. The journal belonged to Father Gabriel, a priest who had served the monastery almost 70 years earlier. She arrived during a snowstorm. She called herself Sister Miriam. She knew every prayer, every scripture, every secret confession. She healed the sick, comforted the dying. Everyone believed she had been sent by God. We were wrong. Father Thomas swallowed hard. The next page had only one sentence. She never blinked. As the journal continued, the handwriting became shakier. Animals refused to go near her. Children cried whenever she smiled. Mirrors never reflected her correctly. And every night, someone disappeared. The monastery lost one sister after another. No bodies. No blood. Just gone. Until only Father Gabriel remained. Then he discovered the truth. Sister Miriam had never been human. She wasn't possessed. She wasn't cursed. She had never even been born. According to the journal, she was something ancient. Something that had existed long before churches. Long before kingdoms. Long before written history. It didn't have a real name. Every culture called it something different. But they all agreed on one thing. It could wear a human face. Perfectly. A loud thud echoed behind him. Father Thomas spun around. The basement door had slammed shut. His lantern flickered violently. Then, footsteps, slow, steady, coming from the darkness. One step. Time. Who's there? Silence. Another step. Closer. Then another. Closer still. Father Thomas raised the lantern. Nothing. The tunnel was empty. Then a voice whispered beside his ear. You shouldn't have come down here. He turned instantly. No one. His breathing became heavier. This isn't funny. The whisper came again. This time. From behind him. I'm right here. He spun around once more. Still nothing. Then, a hand landed on his shoulder. Ice cold. Father Thomas screamed and swung the lantern. The glass shattered. Darkness swallowed the chamber. For several terrifying seconds. He couldn't see anything. Only breathing. Not his. Someone else's. Standing inches away. A match suddenly sparked to life. Its tiny flame revealed. Elias, the old groundskeeper. You scared the life out of me. Father Thomas gasped. Elias didn't smile. His face was covered in sweat. We have to leave. Now. Father Thomas grabbed the journal. This tells us what she is. Elias slowly shook his head. No. It tells us what she wants. They hurried toward the staircase. Halfway up, Father Thomas noticed something carved into every single step. Names. Hundreds of names. Priests, nuns, children, entire families. All missing people from Black Hollow. At the very top, the newest carving hadn't even dried yet. He held the lantern closer. His blood ran cold. It wasn't a random name. It wasn't one of the missing sisters. It was Father Thomas. Freshly carved. As if someone had written it only minutes earlier. No. He whispered. No. No. Suddenly, the monastery bells rang again. Not 3 times. Not 5. They wouldn't stop. Every bell in the tower exploded into deafening noise. Elias looked toward the ceiling. His face turned white. She knows you're here. Before Father Thomas could react, a deep crack echoed through the walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. The entire monastery shook. Then came the scream. Not from the basement. Not from outside. From directly above them. The scream of every remaining nun. All at once. Father Thomas and Elias ran up the stairs. The basement door burst open. They rushed into the main hallway. And froze. The corridor was empty. Every room stood wide open. Every candle had gone out. Every sister had vanished. Only one figure remained at the far end of the hall. The nun. Standing perfectly still. This time, she slowly lifted her veil. Father Thomas finally saw her face. And in that instant, he understood why no survivor had ever been able to describe it. Because it wasn't a face at all. It kept changing. Every second. Young. Man. Woman. Child. Hundreds of faces. All trapped beneath the same skin. Then they all smiled together. And the creature whispered, "You're next." They say evil can't enter a place unless it's invited. But what if it was never trying to get in? What if it had been waiting for someone to let it out? Father Thomas couldn't move. The creature stood at the end of the hallway, smiling with hundreds of stolen faces. Some were old. Some were children. Some belonged to the missing nuns. And one looked exactly like Father Thomas. His heart nearly stopped. "What are you?" The creature tilted its head. Its voice changed every second. Sometimes a little girl. Sometimes an old man. Sometimes Mother Agnes. Sometimes his own voice. "I am whoever you fear the most." The hallway suddenly went black. Not because the lights went out. Because the darkness itself began spreading across the walls like living smoke. Every cross hanging inside the monastery crashed onto the floor at the exact same time. Then, the bells stopped. Complete silence. For the first time since Father Thomas arrived, there wasn't a single sound. Not even the wind. That silence lasted only a few seconds. Then, a scream echoed from the chapel. Father Thomas sprinted toward it. The giant doors stood wide open. Inside, Mother Agnes was kneeling before the altar. Alone. She wasn't praying. She was crying. "I tried to keep it locked," she whispered. "For 30 years. Father Thomas stepped closer. "What are you talking about?" Mother Agnes looked up, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't imprison it. We fed it." Father Thomas froze. "What?" She nodded slowly. "Every few years. We chose one person. So it would leave everyone else alive." Father Thomas felt sick. The missing sisters. They weren't taken. We sacrificed them. Before he could speak, a loud laugh filled the chapel. The stained glass windows exploded inward. Thousands of colorful shards rained across the floor. The creature appeared behind the altar. No footsteps. No warning. Just there. It smiled. You finally told him. Mother Agnes closed her eyes. I'm sorry. The creature raised one claw. In less than a second, everything happened. A sharp crack echoed through the chapel. Mother Agnes collapsed. Gone. Not dragged. Not attacked. She simply disappeared, leaving only her rosary on the floor. The creature looked directly at Father Thomas. Now, it's your turn. Father Thomas grabbed the old journal and remembered Father Gabriel's final entry. There had been one last page he hadn't read. His shaking hands flipped to the end. The final sentence read, You cannot kill it. You cannot fight it. The only prison strong enough is a willing soul. His eyes widened. No. The creature smiled wider. Now you understand. It had never wanted freedom. Wanted a replacement. Someone to take its place beneath the monastery. Someone who would willingly lock themselves away, while it walked free. Every priest before him had refused. Every nun had died protecting the secret. Now, only Father Thomas remained. The creature stretched out one clawed hand. Choose. Your life. Or everyone else's. Outside, the church bells began ringing again. This time, the entire hill shook. The walls cracked. The monastery started collapsing. Father Thomas closed his eyes. He whispered one final prayer. Then, he stepped forward. The creature laughed. The basement floor split open beneath them. Chains burst from the darkness, wrapping around Father Thomas's arms, his legs, his chest. The creature leaned close enough for him to see every stolen face beneath its skin. Then it whispered, Thank you. In the blink of an eye, everything changed. The chains pulled Father Thomas into the darkness. The creature walked free. 3 months later, the Vatican declared Saint Mercy Monastery permanently abandoned. No survivors. No official explanation. The building was sealed forever. Or so everyone believed. One rainy evening, a young priest arrived to inspect the ruins. He knocked on the old wooden door. It slowly opened by itself. Inside, the monastery looked perfectly clean. Candles burned brightly. Soft prayers echoed through the halls. And standing near the altar was a quiet nun in a black veil. She smiled politely. Welcome, Father. I've been waiting for you. The young priest smiled back. Sorry, have we met before? The nun's smile grew just a little wider. No. But we will. As the doors slowly closed behind him, 3 bells echoed across Black Hollow. Ding, ding, ding. And somewhere, deep beneath the monastery, a man could still be heard whispering the same warning. Don't let her out. But no one ever listened, because by the time they heard him, it was already too late.